as a prosecutor, I used to argue the facts all the time.
Mm-hmm.
The facts. I have the evidence. I can prove it. Look at the facts. Now, as a defense attorney, I argue the law all the time. We represented the New York Yankees against Derek Jeter and the New York Yankees against Mariano Rivera. And then just a horrible, brutal, awful scene. His wife was sitting right beside him. The infant child was right there. 8-year-old boy was right there, saw the whole thing. He had 2 little girls upstairs hiding in their closet. And she had a magazine rack with books and magazines on top of her head, about 25 pounds on top of her head.
Have you gotten people off who you knew were guilty?
Yes, 100%. They're young college kids that go out drinking and they go too far, too fast. What you get charged with it, just everybody, the whispers, even if you're found not guilty, still people associate you with that crime. If you're going 90 miles an hour, or 90 or above, there's a possibility of jail time. 95 or above, there's a probability of jail time. 100 or above, there's a guarantee of jail time.
Welcome to another edition of No Holds Barred. I'm Rich Roth, and my guest today is one of the top defense attorneys in the area. Used to be a prosecutor, and we'll talk about that. Chuck Felmlee. What's up, Chuck?
Good to see you. Thank you for having me. Yeah,
good to see you too. I'm excited to talk to you. I mean, we've known each other for a while, and man, you've got a very, very interesting history. In addition to the fact that you've switched sides, and I definitely want to get into that.
I did a couple of years ago.
I was trying to think of different analogies in other professions where you're literally, I mean, you used to put bad people in jail, and now I guess people could make the argument you're trying to.
Well, I would say bad people. But yes, I defend people now that are charged with crime.
Right, I understand. You would say it a little bit.
I wouldn't say bad people, but yeah.
Is there another analogy or a comparison that you would make to another?
I can't think of one off the top of my head, but it's fairly common in criminal law that people start off as prosecutors and learn the trade, and then after a couple of years decide to switch and go to the defense side. I was a little unique because I was a long-term prosecutor. So I prosecuted for 17 years, 2 years in Henrico County and 15 years here in Lynchburg. And then made the decision in 2017 to jump to the other side. But it is a complete 180. And there's nothing I could be doing that's the exact opposite of what I used to do. So that's what I'm doing now. But you're right. So I used to prosecute. People get arrested. I would go to court and prosecute them. And now I do the exact opposite. Now somebody gets arrested, they call me, I go and I try to defend them.
Well, we're going to get into that. But before we do, let's talk a little bit about how you got where you are. You're from the area.
I'm from Lynchburg. I grew up here, went to Easy Glass High School.
A lot of people remember you. I mean, great tennis player, went to Wake Forest, played tennis down there.
I did. I played I went to Wake Forest undergrad, played tennis at Wake Forest. Graduated in 1994. Wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I'm like you, I'm a sports guy. So I love sports. I wanted to do something in sports. Couldn't find anything at the time. But about a month before I graduated undergrad, I got a job in Raleigh. As a marketing assistant for IBM. They hired 15 college graduates from the North and South Carolina area and put us in Raleigh, Greensboro, Winston-Salem, Charlotte, and Columbia, South Carolina. And I was stationed in Raleigh. And so for a year, I worked for some IBM marketing employees. And I basically was an assistant to the marketing staff.
How'd you like that?
It really wasn't my thing. I was glad having a job. So I was living on my own for the first time, had a job, had an apartment in Raleigh. But within 3 or 4 months, I knew this is not long term. And so I was trying to, it took me a couple of months, but I decided, I think I'm going to try to give law school a shot.
So it was really that late after you graduated college?
In undergrad, I never once thought about going to law school. My dad was always sort of pushing it a little bit, and I was very resistant to that. But I made the decision 6-8 months after I graduated. I was living in Raleigh, working in Raleigh. And the reason I went to law school, I wanted to be a sports agent. That's why I went to law school. I love all sports, and I said, let's get into the business side of this. So I took the LSAT and ended up going to George Mason Law School up in Northern Virginia, in Arlington. And I spent 3 years in law school and then stayed in D.C. for another 2 years and worked up there.
Yeah, and that's where you kind of got a taste of the business side of sports and representing. I mean, talk a little bit about that, because I found that interesting. It wasn't necessarily as an agent, but you were working in arbitration cases.
Well, I did when in law school. I actually interned for 2 sports marketing firms.
Okay.
Back in the mid '90s, there were sort of 3 major sports marketing firms. There was ProServe, there was Advantage International. They both happened to be in the D.C. area, and the third one was IMG, who's based out of Cleveland. So my first year of law school, I interned with ProServe. I played college tennis, so I knew a little bit about tennis. So they took me on as an intern, unpaid intern. Donald Dell was the president of ProServe at the time. They used to have Gabriella Sabatini. I think at one point they represented Jimmy Connors and some other players back in the 80s.
Us older people will know.
Yeah, the newer folks will not. But I spent a semester working in their office as helping with their tennis agents out. Mm-hmm. And then I think it was my second year of law school. I interned at Advantage International and assisted one of their basketball agents. And once again, unpaid internship, but it was just neat to see the inner workings. My basketball experience really wasn't with men's basketball, it was more women's basketball. That was when the WNBA was starting up, and there was a woman from the University of Tennessee named Shamika Holesclaw, who some of us will remember. She was an unbelievable college basketball player. And she was going to be coming out as the number 1 pick, and they were trying to get her to sign with them. So my job was to do some background research into her.
You know, we know that the WNBA, I mean, that was when the late 90s?
Yeah, this was like 97-ish.
So the WNBA is in existence there. It's still not making money today.
But yeah.
You know, and I can only imagine, you know, they wanted her. I mean, what type of salaries were, I don't
remember. But I mean, she was the top person coming out at the time.
I know, but even now they're not paid anywhere near what you would think, an agency would be clamoring to get somebody, on board.
Yeah. But that was my assignment. I spent a couple of months just doing background research on Miss Holesclaw. So.
Did you find out anything interesting?
Not that I can remember. No. I only did it
or not that you want to disclose.
Yeah. No, there was nothing that was truly remarkable, but it was neat. And I had decided when I was doing that really wasn't being an agent. That really wasn't the lifestyle I sort of wanted. And it's hard to break into that. You really have to have an inner connection to really know somebody to get to maybe sign an athlete yourself. You can bring an athlete on. And I figured out that really wasn't what I didn't want to do that. So.
But you still worked in sports for a couple of years after graduating.
I did, yeah. So I graduated law school in 1998, and I ended up staying in D.C. for 2 years. And eventually I got a job with a firm in D.C. called Morgan, Lewis, and Bacchius. And they do all kinds of different law, but one of their sections, their labor and employment section in D.C., they represent Major League Baseball teams. So in the fall of 1998, I was hired by Morgan Lewis as a staff associate, not a full-blown associate, just a staff associate, to assist them in their Major League Baseball salary arbitration. And they represented teams against the players and their agents. And they represented the New York Yankees. The Montreal Expos were still in existence back then. The Cleveland Indians, Minnesota Twins, Texas Rangers. There were a few others, but those were the 5 major teams. And they hired me. I knew a lot about sports. I remember during my interview, I talked to them about the Lynchburg Mets. We used to be the Lynchburg Mets back in the day, the Hillcats now. But back in the early 80s, we had Dwight Gooden, Darryl Strawberry, and Lenny Dykstra all at the same time. The Carolina League champs.
Yeah, I've heard there's some wild stories around Lynchburg at that time.
Yeah, I was pretty young, but
was it over Trotters? I heard
it could have been. Yeah, but they just killed the Carolina League back in the day. But I knew a lot of those players, and so they hired me on, and so my job was to help the teams in these salary arbitration hearings. And in the fall of '98, winter of '99. We represented the New York Yankees against Derek Jeter and the New York Yankees against Mariano Rivera.
Wow. 2 greats.
So it was a ton of fun. And my job was to come up with a comparison of salaries of other players that were coming up for salary arbitration and also look at their stats just to show that the salary they were asking for wasn't appropriate. It was more the salary that the team was offering. And I don't know how it is now, but back in the late 90s, of the 4 major sports, baseball, basketball, football, and hockey, baseball was the only pro sport that when when you went to arbitration, that the arbitrator could not split the difference. He had to either pick what the player was offering or the team was offering, or the player wanted what the team was offering. And so it was really important that number you put up had to be somewhat close. If it was way out of whack, then the arbitrator would just go with the other side.
Mm-hmm.
So I was, a lot we dealt with was what number did we offer the player? And so, but then I traveled to Tampa for two winters in a row for the actual arbitration hearings.
That almost feels like, almost to a degree like real estate, right? Where you're looking at comparables and
very much so.
And then you're diving into stats.
Yeah. We didn't have the internet back then. So I had Elias sports books flipping through pages and pages and pages of shortstop, fielding percentages and errors and whatever else I could come up with. That was a very tough time representing the Yankees because, the Yankees, I think they were offering Jeter like $3.8 million and he was asking for a $5 million salary. But they were just coming off their third World Series victory in 4 years. They had just swept the Padres in 1998. And Jeter has all these intangibles too, beyond the stats, everything else. And so, and same with Rivera. Rivera at the time was the top closer in baseball. And
you could make the argument he's still the best ever
of all time.
Yeah.
So, but I was heavily involved in Jeter, specifically Rivera. I was at the table with the Rivera hearing.
Boy, it just goes to show you too the salaries, right? I mean, you're talking about two of the best players in the game, $3, $4, $5 million, and now what they're making.
Now it's off the charts.
Obscene.
Yeah, but Jeter won his hearing, so he got a $5 million 1 year salary. Rivera won his as well. His was like $4.5 million, something like that for a year. And that was heavily involved. Minnesota Twins was the other team that I was really involved with. So I got to know their general manager, Terry Ryan. And they had a utility, I call it a utility outfielder, an outfielder that sort of played all three positions, named Matt Lawton. And so we had an arbitration hearing against him. The Twins won that, so we actually won that hearing. But very neat experience. Loved it. Really enjoyed that.
But?
So. Well, that was only about 3 or 4 months a year. The other 8 months of the year, I was sent to their patent litigation section, just reviewing documents, and that got boring very quickly.
And you start looking at the calendar.
And so, oh my gosh.
When sports season coming back around.
And so I was getting ready to get married. My soon-to-be wife, we were wanting to buy a home. It was very expensive in Northern Virginia. Mm. And so there was... I looked in the Lars Weekly, and there was an opening in Lynchburg, my hometown, as an assistant prosecutor, assistant Commonwealth attorney. So I came down and interviewed and got the job and moved to Lynchburg. In June of 2000, I started as a prosecutor.
And you've been here in Lynchburg ever since, with the exception of a couple-year hiatus?
Yeah, I took I started in 2000, and 2002 to 2004, my wife and I, we moved to Richmond for 2 years. And I was a prosecutor in Richmond. We came back in 2004. But yeah, so 17 years I was a prosecutor, 2000 to 2017. And I started as the lowest of the low. There were 11 prosecutors in Lynchburg. I was number 11 out of 11. And when I started, my job was just to do misdemeanors. So for 1 full year, I was in general district court, and I just handled all the misdemeanors for the city of Lynchburg. Back in the day, possession of marijuana, assault and battery, disorderly conduct, DUI, trespassing, you name it. I just handled the misdemeanors for the city of Lynchburg. But it was a great experience. I was in court every single day. I got to know all the officers in the city. You get to think on your feet. In misdemeanors, you really don't have a file. You learn about the case the day before. So I'm learning it as I'm standing there. But it was a really good experience. Being comfortable in the courtroom, getting to know everybody, and sort of getting to know what the value of a case is.
That seems to me something that younger people today, they sort of want to skip that step, right? Of being the low person on the totem pole, where you really kind of, you gain invaluable experience and learn to work your way up. And it seems like more often than not now, there are a lot of young people who just want to start, that's beneath me, right?
To some extent. Lynchburg still does that. Their current office, their junior prosecutors start at a lower level and are there for a good year and a half learning the ropes. Other jurisdictions don't have the manpower, so they have to stick their junior prosecutors handling major cases. Lynchburg is a large enough office that They let their senior staff handle the more serious cases.
So a couple years doing misdemeanors, and then you get
a year and a half.
Okay.
And then I started doing felonies. And then in 2002, there was an opening in Henrico County in Richmond to become their firearm prosecutor. And I interviewed, and they hired me to be their firearm prosecutor. Loved my time there. It was great getting to see a lot of the top defense attorneys in the state. Mm-hmm. And Richmond's got a ton of very talented criminal defense attorneys. Used to have cases against Craig Cooley, and Craig represented one of the DC snipers. And then just a lot of very skilled defense attorneys in the Richmond area. But in 2004, I got a call from Lynchburg that they had an opening to come back as a deputy Commonwealth attorney, as supervising prosecutor. And my wife and I made the decision. Our son had just been born, so we made the decision to come back to Lynchburg and have loved it ever since.
So, all right, so you come back to Lynchburg as a deputy prosecuting attorney. And you're getting the opportunity to handle the bigger, more important cases. And you did that for 13 years.
From 2004 to 2017. So for 13 years, 9 of those 13 years, I was the drug prosecutor. So I handled most of the drug distribution offenses in the city.
So you're talking, you were talking before the misdemeanor stuff was just the marijuana or whatever, but now you're talking bigger stuff, dealing, cocaine.
Felony cases, right. Yeah.
Okay.
Where people, prison sentences if you're convicted. So I did, for 9 years, I did almost all the drug distribution cases in the city, and would also do some of the violent crime as well. Yeah, I had a heavy caseload. So
what was that like? I mean, I'm imagining you're not dealing with, in a lot of cases, real high quality people. We hear different stories about prosecutors, judges being targeted, different things like that. Anything like that ever happen to you?
The people would get upset and say things. Yes, I had some of those. Yeah. I was pretty aggressive back in the day.
How? So you're not anymore?
Well, not. But I was, when I was 2004 to 2012, 13, still fairly young, had a lot of energy, and I really went after some of these guys. I mean,
for example?
Well, I mean, I had serious murder cases, and I put on every single piece of evidence I could come up with to show that and to prove my case.
I heard in one case you actually brought a whole door into court.
Yes, I did.
Is that true?
Yeah, I did. So I brought everything into court before.
Tell me about that. I mean, I understand a picture of a door, but you literally dragged the whole door.
Because it was an important piece of evidence, and I wanted the jury to see exactly what we're talking about. I brought the door, and mainly was because there was a curtain that went to the door, a very thick curtain, and there was broken glass. I wanted the jury to see how this broken glass would not have been spread out the way it was found, that it was a stage scene.
Okay.
Is what we were showing. I've done that as a prosecutor and a defense attorney. I've brought doors in the courtroom.
What's the craziest thing you brought in the courtroom?
The biggest thing is the door. And the clerks and deputy sheriffs are all mad at me because it takes up all the space and it's huge and stuff. But back in the day, I'd bring all the drugs in the courtroom. Here's a couple ounces of cocaine he sold. This is it right here. Here's all the crack cocaine. Brought pounds and pounds of marijuana in the courtroom. You don't do that anymore. That's not really allowed anymore. But back in the day, I'd bring it in so the jury could see exactly what we're talking about. Guns all the time we had in the courtroom.
Just looking for just an effect.
Well, I mean, it's the real piece of evidence. I want them to see how dangerous and significant what this guy did.
Right, but actually seeing it's a lot different than
hearing about it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed my time as a prosecutor, and had a couple memorable cases that I'll never forget. But
which ones stand out?
Two really in my mind that we spent a ton of time working on. One was in 2006. It was a murder on Early Street. Now, Early Street's a street that runs parallel with Rivermont Avenue, and it was a husband and wife who had inside their home, they had 4 of their children inside the home. The husband, it was a Sunday night. On Sunday afternoon, the husband, if memory serves me right, he won some money gambling. A lot of people knew he'd won $1,000, $2,000 gambling. And so some guys decided to go rob him that night. So at 11 o'clock at night, there was a knock at the door. And the husband and wife were upstairs in bed, and they had a little infant with them in the room. Their 8-year-old son opened the door. He happened to be downstairs watching TV. He opened the door, and these 3 defendants came in, all wearing masks. They came in. One defendant stayed downstairs and held the 8-year-old boy. The other 2 masked men went upstairs and went into the master bedroom, and they both had guns. And that's where they took the husband and wife, and the wife is holding this little 3-month-old child and demanding money, demanding drugs, demanding everything. Eventually took them downstairs at gunpoint and held them, had them at gunpoint on a sofa. One of them was rummaging around trying to find things and couldn't find it. He got upset, and he came over and put a shotgun to the side of the man's head and pulled the trigger and killed the husband. And then just a horrible, brutal, awful scene. His wife was sitting right beside him. The infant child was right there. 8-year-old boy was right there, saw the whole thing. He had 2 little girls upstairs hiding in their closet up in a bedroom. Lynchburg police got called out there that night, obviously went rushing out there. The wife was just terrific. I mean, I was traumatized beyond belief. But she recognized one of the intruders. Despite he had something over his face, she recognized him. She said, I went to middle school with him. I remember him. Wow. And so police went and found that guy that night. He made gave 4 different stories of what happened. He eventually admitted he was there, but didn't, downplayed his role. But they found the pants he was wearing when he was arrested had the blood from the victim's blood on it. But he was not the trigger man. Eventually found out the identity of the trigger man. And Lynchburg police, back in the day, back in 2006, we still had America's Most Wanted, if you remember that show that was on TV. And so Lynchburg police, it was about 30 days we hadn't found him. He was missing. And so we
know who it was, though.
We knew who it was.
You just couldn't
find him.
Okay.
And Lynchburg police actually contacted Detective Gibson, Barbara Gibson contacted America's Most Wanted. And there was talk about, we're going to do a little segment on America's Most Wanted. Just put a little 30-second blip. Lynchburg, Virginia police are looking for Carson Washington. Before they actually got down to actually submitting their application to be on the program, got a call from New Orleans, a parish outside of New Orleans, Louisiana. They'd arrested him selling crack cocaine down in New Orleans.
Wow.
And we said, hold on to him. We've got murder charges in Lynchburg for him. So 2 Lynchburg detectives flew down to New Orleans, picked him up, brought him back up here. We charged him with capital murder. And he's the only defendant that I ever had that we were seeking the death penalty, a case that I was the lead prosecutor on. So we were actively seeking the death penalty. I filed my formal notice. We're seeking the death penalty. He had a violent, horrible record. And this was the second person he'd shot in the head. First person survived. This was the second person. We were ready to go to trial. And about 2-3 weeks before trial, the defense attorney came to me and said, listen, if we plead guilty and we'll agree to life in prison without parole, will you agree to it? So I went to my boss at the time and he said, let's do it. So
tell me about making that decision. And obviously, that you said your boss, you were the number 2 guy at that time, right? So you had to go to him. They make that decision. What goes into that? Because obviously there are a lot of factors, right?
I mean,
you're rolling the dice in court.
You don't know what's going to happen at trial. You don't. And in we no longer have capital murder in Virginia. Now it's called aggravated murder. We no longer have the death penalty. But with capital murder, if you're convicted, there are 2 penalties. You either get the death penalty or you get life in prison without the possibility of parole. No geriatric parole, no nothing. You spend the rest of your life in prison. And so we went to the wife and the family and explained everything, and they were on board with it and thought that would be a tougher sentence for him. So he was sentenced to life plus 200 years in prison.
Wow.
And he's not eligible for any kind of geriatric parole. So that was a big one.
You said there was another one.
Yeah, the other big one was in 2012. I'll never forget this. This was December 19th of 2012. This is over in the Lincoln Forest area of town on Ravenwood Drive.
Man, you still remember the date?
I remember the date, yes. And it was an 86-year-old woman named Linda Slocum who lived by her husband was deceased. She lived by herself. And she was the type of neighbor that every morning she'd get up early and go put people's newspapers up on take it from the driveway and put it up on right beside their front door. It did like clockwork. In the morning of December the 20th, 2012, neighbors woke up and noticed she hadn't done it. And then noticed they looked over and didn't see. Normally they'd see. They knew her routine, and they looked out for her. And then noticed they hadn't seen her that morning. She had a light on in one of her front rooms that she never left this light on.
Mm-hmm.
So by lunchtime, they were starting to get worried. Maybe she'd had a health problem. So they called Lynchburg police for just a person's check. So Lynchburg police, about 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the afternoon on December the 20th, 2012, got out to her house, went to the front door. She didn't answer. They went around to the back of her house, and then she had a back door to her basement. And they noticed there was a broken window pane. Looked like there'd been a break-in.
Mm-hmm.
So the field officers pulled their guns out, entered the residence, and eventually found her body. She was in her den upstairs on the first floor, and she was deceased, sitting in a chair. She had a blanket covering her head, and she had a magazine rack with books and magazines on top of her head, about 25 pounds on top of her head. And she was deceased. They looked around, and they found money laying out. They found jewelry laying out, electronics. Nothing appeared to be missing. And so police were like, what do we have?
Because you would assume.
You go break in, you go steal stuff, a burglary. Mm-hmm. But nothing appeared to be missing at all. And so I said, we either got one of two things. We either got a maniac who was just randomly killing people, or she was targeted. Something's not right here.
Mm-hmm.
So she had one living child, a 50-year-old daughter, lived in Richmond, and they called her, and she came in from Richmond as fast as she could. And they talked to her, and they said, do you have any idea who could have done this to your mother? And she said, well, I'm going through a divorce, and my soon-to-be ex-husband's a heroin addict, and he's not right.
Mm.
So we just had a huge blow-up earlier today. So Lynchburg police that night, the night of December 20th, he lived in Hopewell. They immediately went to Hopewell, Virginia, went to his house. Detective Tiny Lloyd, I'll never forget, talked to him and said, when's the last time you were in Lynchburg? And he said he hadn't been to Lynchburg for 7 or 8 months. He denied it had anything to do with it and denied being in Lynchburg a long time. So they said thank you, and they left. It was on Christmas Eve. They got his phone records, and his phone records put him in Lynchburg that night.
Mm.
Now, his phone records never put him at the house. We had no eyewitnesses. We had no confession. It was an entirely circumstantial case. But that was the case we eventually brought the door into the courtroom.
Oh, it was? Okay.
Because it appeared to us he staged the crime scene to make it look like a burglary after the
But he forgot to steal stuff.
He didn't, right. He didn't steal anything. And his DNA was found on a doorknob inside the house. And we could prove he hadn't been to that house in a long, long time. Mm-hmm. And this was a doorknob that she would have touched every single day. And our DNA expert would testify that if this was a doorknob that was used on a daily basis, that if he had been there, and we don't even know if he touched that doorknob
7 or 8 months ago, right?
Yeah, we don't know. But even if he did, there was a lot of his DNA on this doorknob. So he recently touched that doorknob. And there are a lot of other evidence we put on, but it was that was a big one. We brought the door in to show certain. And this is actually the door where the broken glass was, because this door on the inside had a curtain to it, and if somebody on the outside punched that glass in, it would have hit the curtain and dropped straight down.
Mm-hmm.
But the glass was spread all out through the floor like it had, and there was a broom right there. So he had busted. I think our theory was he killed her, and then he's like, we panicked. Well, I can make it look like a break-in. So he went and busted that window pane out, and then he swept the glass all around. But that's not how it would have gone. If this is a truly break-in, the glass would have hit that. It was a thick, heavy curtain with a rod on the bottom, keeping it snug against the door itself. That glass would have been stuck right there in the curtain, would not have gone anywhere. But it was spread all out. And that was an interesting piece of our case to show that this was a staged crime scene. We had a lot of evidence and we had video evidence from him. He was at the Bedford Avenue 7-Eleven and the Wadsworth 7-Eleven in a state of panic that night. But it was interesting. So it was a big case. He was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 35 years in prison. So
did he ever wind up admitting to it?
Never did. No, never did. Never did.
So in a case like that, where just all circumstantial evidence those are the toughest to win, right?
They are circumstantial evidence. I mean, you really can't. If there's eyewitness testimony, you can say, well, they're mistaken, they're wrong, they're biased. Circumstantial evidence is hard to combat. And his phone records put him at this certain location at a certain time, and we knew he had his phone. Other things, I can't remember all the evidence in the case, but he was a desperate heroin addict. And another thing, after his wife, they had a huge fight that day. And he was a heroin addict. He'd been a VMI football player. He had injuries from VMI playing football. It turned into pain medication thing, then turned into heroin. He had contacted his heroin dealer that night out of the blue, said, I'm going to Lynchburg tonight. Do you need me to do anything for you while I'm in Lynchburg? And he never told why he was going to Lynchburg, but he had a reason to go to Lynchburg that night. And evidence showed that he was going to talk to his mother-in-law, complain about her, and lost it. And the way she was killed was horrible. She was when she was found, that she wasn't shot, she wasn't stabbed, she was essentially beaten to death. And he was a big, huge man, and he would have been capable of doing that.
Dude, you've seen a lot of horrible stuff.
That was a bad case. It really was. And she was a completely innocent woman in the safety of her own home at night, and he comes in there and did that. It was awful. It was terrible.
You bring up these two cases, they're the most memorable, but you've seen so many others, drugs and assault and all kinds of different stuff. And is it safe to say that, a lot of people may have thought, maybe even you thought, that you'd be a career prosecutor and keep moving up and eventually be Commonwealth attorney and go from there?
I did. That was the plan. When I came back in 2004, that's why I came back. I loved doing that. I loved my job. And I'm from Lynchburg. And in 2017, when I left, my boss at the time, Mike Doucette, was stepping down. I announced I was going to run for Commonwealth attorney. But I'm a bad micromanager of things. And when I got my cases, I didn't want anybody else meddle with my cases. And I like taking as many cases as I could. As a Commonwealth attorney, you really need to manage the office, and a lot of administrative things you do and things outside the office. I wasn't sure I was going to be that great at that. And so I went and had lunch with a couple of my friends that are defense attorneys. I thought there was an opening for somebody my age to sort of come in. With my experience being a long-time prosecutor, I think that would help me. And so I talked to my wife, and we said, let's give it a shot. And so...
being a Commonwealth attorney, sort of a political position as well? It
is, yeah. No, you're elected every 4 years.
But how big of a role are politics in that?
Not so much.
No?
Not so much. I mean, you can run as a Republican, Democrat, or independent, and I probably would have run as an independent. But you do have to, if you have an opponent, you have to campaign. And to me, the thought of having to go put up yard signs all across the city, I just wanted to throw up. Gosh, I have no interest in putting yard signs and billboards up, vote for Chuck. Oh gosh,
How far in the process did you get?
Not far. I mean, I talked to WSET and News in Advance, and they did articles that I was going to run. But within less than a month, I told the office that I decided I was not going to. And I was going to support Bethany Harrison, who was the other deputy with me at the time in the office.
Was she running at the time you said you were?
No.
So she stepped up.
Yeah. I went to her and I said, listen, I'm not going to run. We'd love for somebody inside the office to do it. You'd be great. And she's done a great job ever since.
So you make the decision to hang your own shingle.
I did, yeah. So July 1st of 2017 is when I started my own practice. And I do 99% criminal defense. So I do some protective orders, and every now and then I'll dabble in a little civil thing, but I'm pretty much exclusively criminal defense attorney.
What was the reaction from folks?
A lot of surprise, yeah. Everybody.
Again, we're not talking. You did it a couple years, and hey, you did this a long time. Knew a lot of people. I mean, the police, from everything that I've heard and the people I've talked to, loved you. You worked your butt off. You had their backs.
I did. I worked hard. I did. I really put a lot of time in my cases. But it's not an uncommon thing. It really is. In most jurisdictions, most of the seasoned defense attorneys are former prosecutors. They don't do it as long as I did. I'm doing it for 17 years. It's probably too long. I should have left a little earlier, but it's very, very common that in the Lynchburg area, most of the defense attorneys have some prosecutorial experience along the way. Not all of them, but a lot of them do. I'm a little different just because I was such a long-term prosecutor.
Maybe it's not a big deal to people who are in the system and know it, but as someone who's not in the legal system, at least working it.
Yeah.
Traffic court.
I've heard about traffic court.
That doesn't count, right?
Yeah.
But you sit there and you're like, wow, what a dramatic difference to go from, and I'm going to say it, and you're going to argue with me, but putting the bad guys in jail versus keeping them out of jail.
Yeah.
That's how I think a lot of us folks look at it. And it's like, wow.
It's a 180.
How does that happen?
It's the exact opposite.
Tell me about the mindset. What was the thought process?
Well, there is some burnout after a while. As a prosecutor, all of them do. They have crushing caseloads. And you feel pressure to prove your case. You have a victim and you want to make that victim, justice to be served. So I experienced some burnout and I was getting a little tired, and
a new challenge, really, right?
Yeah, it's different. It's different. The thought of being my own boss without having if I was Commonwealth attorney, I'd have a office, 25, 30 people in Lynchburg. And at the time, my son was heavily involved in travel sports. My daughter was very involved in acting and gymnastics and stuff. And so I thought it'd give me more time to sort of do some stuff with them. And we were traveling all the time with my son with all of his stuff.
Travel sports.
Oh, gosh. Good God. Yeah, now I'm on the other end of it. Oh, I wish I could talk to all these parents of kids that are 9 and 10 and stuff. You do not need to do travel sports at that age. Do not.
My wife's favorite
saying. We were suckered into doing it.
Oh, yeah. My wife's favorite saying, I'd have a new kitchen if it wasn't for travel lacrosse. Like, what are you talking about? She's like, do you know how much money we spent?
Yeah.
I kind of want to think about it.
We were travel baseball forever and also dabbled in travel hockey for a couple of years. So,
in hockey, you had to be really traveling.
Up as far as North Pennsylvania and down to Florida.
Wow.
But it was quite a bit. It's expensive too. Travel hockey is expensive.
I tell you what, anytime you hop on a plane for travel sports.
Ridiculous. Completely ridiculous. Yes. 100% ridiculous.
I'm there with you. I did it once and I'm like, well, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
What are we doing?
I think all parents agree on that.
Okay. So you make the switch, but circling back to prosecuting attorney, you talked about 2 cases that were extremely memorable. There's got to be at least one that was one that got away. Can you think of one where it was like, man, how did we not get that? Or how did that? I know they were guilty and they didn't get
it. Absolutely. I lost cases. They weren't huge cases, but I did lose 2 jury trials, a drug distribution case and a gun case. Came back not guilty verdicts on both of them. And the first one.
So wait. In 17 years, you lost 2?
Oh, no. I lost more than that. Golly. Yeah, no. Rules have changed since when I was a prosecutor.
Okay.
Now, juries are more advantageous for the defense side. Back in the day, it was better for the prosecution. And we win more cases when I was prosecuting, just the way the rules were at the time. But I did lose. I remember 2 jury trials I lost. One was a possession with intent to distribute. It was over off of Memorial Avenue. They found a huge stash of drugs at a house, and we charged the guy that was there. And we thought we had sufficient evidence to convict him. But the jury came back not guilty. And within 5 years, he committed suicide down in North Carolina. It was awful. He killed somebody, then shot himself. It was horrible. The other case that I remember that I was, knew for sure the guy was guilty. It was a felony gun charge. Possession of firearm by a convicted felon over on street off of Grace Street, downtown Lynchburg area. Jury came back not guilty. And then it was probably 8 or 9 years later, I got called to the scene of a homicide. I used to go to all the homicide scenes. If a murder happened, I would go. I just enjoyed doing that. So I would go sort of see what the scene was. I'd come back, report it to my boss, and we'd decide who was assigned the case to. And I remember going to the homicide scene, And there on the ground, the dead guy was the guy that I had lost a jury trial to a couple of years back. So both of those cases, they ended up, one killed himself and another was being killed. I ended up prosecuting that case, the guy that was...
Killed the guy that you couldn't...
yeah, it was the guy that I went to the scene of the homicide. He was laying there. I prosecuted that case. So I got to know the victim's family and super family. But, if he had just, If he had been found guilty of my case, he might be alive, unfortunately, but or fortunately for him. But yeah, there were cases that I felt we had sufficient evidence, but either the judge or the jury just did not agree.
Flipping it around, same question, sort of. As a defense attorney, have you gotten people off who you knew were guilty?
Yes, 100%.
And you're smiling.
Well, my job...
Does that make...
my job is to make sure the prosecution proves their case beyond a reasonable doubt. And a prosecutor's job is hard because, sometimes people recant. In a lot of these domestic situations, people don't want to see their loved ones going to jail. So they'll come to court and say, well, it didn't really happen that way. And so that's hard for a prosecutor. But you never know how evidence is going to shake out in the courtroom. And so I certainly have had folks that have been charged with all kinds of offenses that have come back not guilty just because they just can't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. I do a lot of drug cases where it's a constructive possession case. So there are two different kinds of possession. There's actual possession, there's constructive possession.
Okay.
Actual possession is you have the drugs on yourself. It's in your hands or in your pants pocket. Constructive possession, prosecution has to prove two things. Number one, that the drugs are within the person's dominion and control. So it's in a location somewhere that I have control of, and I can access it.
Car, house.
House, yeah. So like right now in my home, in my sock drawer, I'm not at my house, but I have dominion and control over my sock drawer. It's in my bedroom, in my house. That's locked. I've got my keys. Just me and my wife that are living there now. So I'm not there, but I've got dominion and control over that. So they got to prove dominion and control. And the second thing you have to prove is knowledge, that I know about that object. And that's the harder thing for prosecutors to prove. So we get a lot of traffic stops. Somebody gets stopped for speeding or some kind of traffic infraction. Cops end up searching the car and they find some drugs in the car. And they'll charge the driver with possession of cocaine or possession of methamphetamine. And it's a big fight in the courtroom to say, well, can they prove he had knowledge of it?
Right, because the first thing he's going to say,
it's not in plain view. Well, but the crime is not ownership of drugs. The crime is possession. So it doesn't matter really whose it is. Can the prosecutor prove that you had possession of it? Did you have knowledge of it and dominion and control? You can have joint possession. So I could put a big old bag of drugs in between you and me right now. It might be my drugs. Right, I brought the drugs here.
Okay.
But if you and I both, know about it and you can be convicted of possession of whatever I just put there.
So the same thing in a car, right? I mean, if you jump in a car and I know you've got something with you.
And I put it in the center console. Hey, Rich, I'm putting my drugs right here in the center console. You're like, okay. You can be, it's my drugs, but you can be convicted of possession. The crime is possession, not ownership of the contraband. So with a lot of our cases, the drug cases, it's a fight of can they prove knowledge? Can the prosecution prove beyond a reasonable doubt that my client knew it was there?
So as a defense attorney, you get someone off, they're acquitted, you know that they're guilty. You've won that case because the prosecution didn't do their job, right? That's what we're.
Well, I mean, they could prove it, but I understand. Okay. Yeah,
two things. One, especially if it were like a serious criminal, not just a drug case or whatever, but an assault or a murder or something like that. Yeah, I mean something violent. On one hand, be thinking, man, I'm putting this guy back out on the street. But on the other hand, I mean, I did a hell of a job. I could see that part of it too. The challenge that you talked about before about doing something different. And, now I have to prove, this type of thing. Which of those emotions, if either?
Well, as a prosecutor, I used to argue the facts all the time. Facts, the facts, the facts. I have the evidence. I can prove it. Look at the facts, the facts, the facts. Now, as a defense attorney, I argue the law all the time. I know they've got all these facts over here, but still what they're claiming does not violate this code section. If you read it the way it's written, they technically have not violated that code section. So it's
what's an example of that?
I recently had a case where a guy came into Lynchburg and was trying to pick up a prostitute. And he went down, and the evidence showed that he went to this room at a motel, met up with her, and then he strangled her and left her there. And when her friends came back to the room, she was laying there naked on the floor, almost dead. And eventually the prosecution charged him with strangulation, and she was found naked, completely naked. And the prosecution charged him with strangulation and aggravated sexual battery, touching somebody's intimate parts while they were mentally incapacitated or physically helpless. And we all knew, he probably did touch her, but the prosecution just couldn't prove it. And the prosecutor kept arguing that, we had. They actually swabbed her intimate parts, and his DNA was not on those intimate parts, surprisingly so. And so I just kept arguing the law. Judge, the law requires that there has to be evidence beyond a reasonable doubt that he actually touched an intimate part. So it was a big discussion about when he took the shirt off, would he touch her breast? Did his hand? There has to be evidence that he touched her. We know he probably took her shirt off, but they can't prove he actually touched her breast. Look at what the code section says. There's a big argument over that.
Did you win that?
I did. He was convicted of strangulation. He got a pretty significant sentence on the strangulation.
But the other one.
But he was acquitted on the aggravated sexual battery, which is significant for him because now he doesn't have to be on the sex offender registry. It's a strange set of facts to that case. But yeah, I almost conceded the strangulation. It was a pretty bad strangulation. But
you talked about sexual assault, and you and I have had this conversation. We both have, I don't want to say young boys, but college age boys, and things are changing. And, you were telling me that, you have a number of cases of, guys who hooked up with girls and, next thing you know, they changed their story because daddy found out, or they have a boyfriend or something like that. And talk about that a little bit.
Well, on the defense side, as a prosecutor, I didn't do many sex crimes. On the defense side, that is a significant portion of my caseload, or sex crimes. And unfortunately, there are a lot of college kids. And I'd say 85, 90% of them involve alcohol. They're young college kids that go out drinking, and they go too far, too fast. And then there's regret the next morning. And then there's a police report made, there's an investigation, and sometimes these guys get charged. And so it's, I've dealt with a lot of local college kids charged with that. Under investigation, it causes a tremendous amount of stress to the kid, to the family. They get kicked out of school. I mean, it's horrible. And the judicial system, it works, but it's slow. If you get charged with a major sex crime, we're probably talking, earliest we go to trial is 6 to 9 months. More than likely, it's going to be a year and a half, sometimes 2 years down the road before we're actually going to go to trial. So this is hanging over their head for that long. And it's a horrible experience to be in. Sex crimes in Virginia, the penalties are extremely tough. A lot of them face up life in prison. You can have no record, nothing at all. And if you have too much to drink and you go too far, too fast, you could be facing multiple life sentences on a felony sex crimes. And if convicted, you're on the sex offender registry the rest of your life.
So you've seen a number of these.
Oh, yeah.
What advice do you have for young people? What advice do you have for parents who are talking to young people about
it? It's so hard. I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, it's just, and like I said, alcohol play, and sometimes drugs, but it's 90% alcohol. The young, inexperienced, both with alcohol and with sex. And you have too much to drink, you start getting frisky, and next thing you know, you've gone too far. And it's just, parents they need to talk to their children to know what could happen. And there are major ramifications if something like this happens. One case sticks out in my mind on the defense side. He's a Liberty kid, no record at all, just comes from a terrific family. He's not really even a drinker. And he was in the aeronautics program at Liberty. And this was spring break. He stayed on campus to get some extra flying hours in just a couple of years back. So he didn't even go to spring break with his friends. He stayed back. They were all just, whoever was in town was getting together, and they all had a little too much to drink, and he had a little too much to drink, and a girl had fallen asleep on the floor, and he went down, laid down beside her, and ended up touching her in an inappropriate way. It was not rape, but he touched her private areas in an inappropriate way. Woke up the next morning and realized what he had done, called her and apologized to her, trying to do the right thing. His moral compass was on the right track. Admitted everything to the police, got charged, was convicted. He's on the sex offender registry. I begged the prosecutors to do something for this kid. But they went forward, and he was charged with 2 felony sex crimes. He was convicted of 1, but that 1 was enough.
That's enough.
It's enough. Now he's turned the ship around. I keep in touch with him a little bit, and he's married now. But still he's on the sex offender registry. That's
got to be a tough conversation to have with your future wife.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. But and his parents were just wonderful people, and got to know them very well, and we did everything we could.
So the flip side of that, though, where the girl has regrets or remorse, or someone finds out and her story changes. I mean, even like you said, the wheels of justice turn pretty slowly. Something like that happens, kid's life could still be ruined, or at least.
Yeah, what you get charged with it. Just everybody, the whispers, even if you're found not guilty, still people associate you with that crime. Had another local college student, went to a local movie theater, and engaged in a sex act in the back of a movie theater with a girl. And after the sex act, she stayed in the theater and watched the rest of the movie with him. He then drove her home. They then texted that night to each other that they had a good time. She woke up the next morning and said, just talked to her friends, and they said, there's no way you would have done that. He must have forced you to do that. And she said, yeah, I think he did. And went to police, and he got charged with a violent sex crime. We had a trial, and he was acquitted. But he's still, people associate that with him forever. Locally, at least.
And obviously what we've seen in the last, decade or so, the Me Too movement and all that. And, we need to take these accusations seriously.
I'm not saying don't take them seriously.
I know.
I'm all about investigating these things.
That's what I'm saying is, these need to be taken seriously, but they have ramifications when, they're not accurate.
Yeah.
And that's a very fine line. Do we see more of that now than we used to?
I don't.
No,
not really. I think it's about the same. But I mean, police have a tough job. And prosecutors have a tough job. I'm on the other side now, so I wish they would exercise a little more judicial discretion as far as whether they're going to make the charging decision, prosecutorial discretion as far as making the charging decision or not. But and you talk about putting the bad guys in jail. No, I'm defending the bad guys. On my side now, I get to see more of the people charged with crimes and get to see and hear more about their families, and really shows me this. It's not black and white. There's a lot of gray to what we deal with. So I get to see a total different side. And the prosecutors have their job, and they did a good job, but they're going forward, and they're focusing on that crime. I get to see all the other side of the person, that everything he's doing well, and he's struggling in life and all that. So that's a big part of what I do. Even if there's sufficient evidence to convict my client, I try to show the judge, hey, listen, there's a different side of this guy. It's not all about this one act that he committed. We'll concede he did that, but he doesn't need to be sentenced as harshly as what the prosecutor is requesting.
Sex crimes, obviously, that dynamic's changed. Social media has to have changed everything.
Almost every crime now. It is, if there's an investigation going into it, they almost always seize your cell phone. Seize a cell phone, they get a warrant, and they're checking for your text messages, checking for what you've been Googling, stuff like that. And people, a lot of people will Google whatever they're getting ready to do. In fact,
that's just not on TV.
No. We were talking about this. My guy that came into Lynchburg and met a prostitute at a local motel and strangled her. Well, he was afterwards. His Google searches were for Can somebody survive being choked to death? And that helped.
Choked to death? Can someone survive?
Can somebody survive their esophagus being crushed? Can somebody survive?
Oh, geez.
So that was more evidence to help identify he's our guy.
Right.
He is our guy.
Right.
They can identify him, but plus his searches are right on par with what happened. Yeah. So social media. The Lynchburg Police Department, they have a unit. They routinely on these big cases, they're checking Snapchat, Instagram, whatever, Facebook, everything. They have a team of investigators that look at all that.
Yeah, and that stuff doesn't go away. I mean, that's the thing. I think a lot of younger people or people who are using those, forums or those, those social media channels.
Right.
You don't remember that, but I mean, you post. People are going to go back through all of that stuff. I mean, even colleges, right? You're applying to colleges. They're going to look at that type of stuff. Is this a type of person? I mean, you're posting pictures of you're in high school and you're drinking with your buddies, right?
I remember my daughter was talking about a year and a half before she applied to college. I better be careful, But just I was warned. Oh, that's a great idea. You better, don't post anything stupid.
Chuck, one thing I think I told you that I heard, since you made the switch, that you've run into some instances with people that you had previously convicted.
Yes.
And some of your notes as a prosecutor may have been used against you.
Well, the Lynchburg prosecutors tease me about it. If it's the case that I'm not allowed to represent anybody if it's a case I prosecuted and the person's come back on a probation violation, I'm prohibited ethically from representing them. I can represent them if they've committed new crimes. And a lot of these guys,
And you've done that?
I've done that, yes. So for sentencing purposes, if they're convicted of the new crime, the prosecutor can let the judge know about the previous crimes they've committed.
And we've seen here today you have a really good memory. So I want to know what it was like the first time that someone you put away came back in and is like, I need you to defend me. What was going through your head?
Yeah, no, it's respect. They knew I was just doing my job. I don't think anybody really holds any personal grudge. They know they were mad at me at the time, but now they'd like me to be on their side if possible, to be on their memory of me being pretty aggressive back in the day. But it's been good.
I mean, obviously, honestly, you're good.
Well, no, I've been around for a long time now compared to some. And I've gotten to be friends with some of these guys that have long criminal records, but a lot of them struggle with substance abuse. And if that was out of the equation, they were really not. They commit crimes because they're high or they're drunk or they're doing something. But when they're sober, they're pretty good, decent guys to talk to. So I see them walking around downtown, and we always talk and yuck it up for a few minutes.
Dude, that's pretty wild.
I saw a guy yesterday it was a long time drug dealer in Lynchburg. I had a bunch of cases with him, and we stopped on the street and talked for a few minutes. So it was good seeing him.
You're also a substitute judge.
Yeah. So I got appointed about 3 years ago, and so in Virginia, judges are appointed. District court judges appointed for a 6-year term. Circuit court judges appointed for 8-year term. And if you're a retired judge, you can come back and sit. So if a lot of the judges are out sick or on vacation, they bring the retired judges back to sit in for the day. But they're low on the number of judges, so local jurisdictions can also appoint certain attorneys. So I'm used to being in the courtroom. I'm one of 6 or 7 local attorneys they've appointed as a substitute judge. I'm not allowed to sit in circuit court, but I can sit in either general district court or juvenile domestic relations. And they call us if a judge is out sick or on vacation, and we'll sit for the day.
What's that like?
Oh, I've enjoyed it. It's a total different experience. I don't do J&D court juveniles. I just do general district court. So if I sit for the day, I'm handling traffic tickets, criminal misdemeanors, or preliminary hearings on felonies and bond hearings. But it's it's very comfortable doing it. I know all the defense attorneys and all the prosecutors, so we all know each other.
How is that different though than being either a prosecutor or a defense attorney?
You have to do a lot of listening when you're on the bench to listen to both sides and make a ruling. What I do, I'm not on any major case at all. I'm doing minor level stuff, but I've enjoyed it. The one thing I was surprised when I first started doing it, when it came time, if I found somebody guilty of a misdemeanor crime, most of the time, people really don't get jail sentences. They get suspended time or a fine or something. But every now and then somebody's got a record and they've done something pretty stupid and it's deserving of active incarceration. I really struggled with actually imposing a jail sentence on somebody. For 17 years as a prosecutor, I was in there asking the judge to do this and that and send them to prison for long, long sentences. But when it came time for me having the ability to actually do that to somebody, I really struggled with it. And I told a couple other judges that it surprised me. It was really tough thinking about that I was going to send somebody to go to jail. I've gotten over that now, but still, I just do minor cases. It's nothing significant that I'm involved in.
I would have to imagine, much like being a prosecutor helped you as a defense attorney because you understand what's going through the mind of the other side, right? I mean, kind of like we see that a lot where, people who will play offense or defense in a sport and then they become a coordinator on the other side, right? Because they understand what's going on.
What the other side is trying to do, right?
And I would have to imagine that now sitting in that third perspective as a judge, you learn more things.
Yeah, I think you learn how to be a better advocate because when you're sitting on the bench, you know, what is the issue? Let's cut through this fluff. I don't care about this. What is the issue that we're having the debate about today? Let's go right to the issue. What is your side? What is your side? Let's make a decision. And so I think sitting as a judge, I've probably seen it how maybe focus my cases better when I'm defending somebody. I think the judges appreciate that more. Let's just go right to what is the main issue here. And so I try to be more direct.
So less theatrics,
right? Well, I am sort of theatrical. People know me as that. I hand motions and I do get pretty animated, but when it comes to whatever the issue is, let's go straight to that. And we'll concede this. We'll agree to that. This is the one thing we're here today for. And I try to do that in most of the cases I have. If we're going to plead not guilty and we're going to fight the case, most of the stuff is not contested. If it's a DUI, we agree. We deserve to be pulled over. The issue, Judge, is that they didn't have probable cause to arrest. I agree. It's a good stop. So who cares? Let's don't worry about the stop. Let's talk about did they have enough evidence to actually arrest my client. So that's a debate we have a lot of time in court.
Can you watch movies or TV shows in court and just does it drive you crazy? This is so unrealistic.
I don't.
Really?
I can't watch any of them.
No.
My wife loves watching all those shows.
Law and Order,
SV, all that stuff, and she really will. She can sit down and watch 8 episodes in a row if she's rolling. But I can't.
Why?
Yeah, it's not realistic.
It's not at all.
Not at all.
Is there any that's
no, not at all. It's not nowhere close to what is going on. The prosecutors talking to the defendants and stuff, that never happens. Like, you can't do that. I know they're very popular shows and they're well liked, but I think most of us who are in the business that do it all the time have no interest in just because it's not realistic at all.
What about like court TV or some of the reality stuff?
I really don't watch that either. No. I mean, sometimes court TV. I don't think I have that anymore, but.
I don't know if it's existing.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if it exists either.
I remember it used to be a thing.
Yeah, it used to be a big deal back there in O.J. Simpson days in the 90s. But sometimes I could watch a little bit of that. But
not really.
The fictional shows, no.
Chuck, what's next for you, man?
I'm enjoying what I'm doing. So I've been at it for about almost 26 years now. I have an office down on Clay Street, downtown Lynchburg. I'm a defense attorney, and I practice in Lynchburg, Amherst, Bedford, Campbell, and Appomattox. So Lynchburg and the 4 surrounding counties. Sometimes I'll go to Nelson County, sometimes down to Pittsylvania County. But I try to stay just right here, home base in Lynchburg, in the surrounding counties.
Specific types of cases that you prefer?
Not really. I mean, I do. I don't. A lot of people call me for traffic violations. I really don't get involved in traffic violations. I really just get involved if there's a possibility of jail time. So if you're arrested for a DUI, I do a lot of DUIs, do a lot of reckless driving by speeds if you're going over 80 miles an hour, 90 miles an hour, something like that.
I've heard that.
A lot of people are surprised that, especially out there in Amherst County, on the bypass, and the speed limit is 70, and it's flat, and you can see forever. So people just start cooking. And I tell people, if you're going 90 miles an hour, over 90 or above, there's a possibility of jail time. 95 or above, there's a probability of jail time. 100 or above, there's a guarantee of jail time. And some people are just astonished that you can go to jail. I know, it's a class 1 misdemeanor. And our local judges do. They impose active jail sentences, revocation of licenses.
A state trooper from another state, New Jersey, once told me that their motto was 9 you're fine, 10 you're mine. So if you're going 9 over, they're going to leave you alone, but 10 or more.
It depends. I've always said don't go more than 7 over. Is what I was told. So I tweaked that down a little bit. Yeah.
All right, noted.
Yeah.
Noted.
Yeah.
Judgeship? Is that the right term even?
I think
you're doing it a little bit.
But as a substitute judge.
Yeah. But I mean, maybe down the road.
I think everybody who's in this business in criminal law, whether you're a prosecutor, defense attorney, has certainly thought about it at some point. It's not the right time for me right now. I'm enjoying my practice. Busy. Maybe down the road, a possibility. I wouldn't say probability, but I would look into it. Who knows?
But in the meantime, you're good doing your thing. In
the meantime, I enjoy what I'm doing. In doing the substitute judge position is a nice breath of fresh air, and a little bit of a break every now and then. I don't do it too often. Once every other month.
Okay.
But I'll sit. But I sit in Lynchburg, Amherst, Bedford, and Campbell. Those are my 4 jurisdictions in just general district court. If a judge is out sick on vacation, but I enjoy my practice. I would never say never to something.
You'd be foolish to. Anyone would be.
My wife and I used to joke, we'd never move into my grandmother's house. We moved into my grandmother's house. We would never move back to Lynchburg. We moved back to Lynchburg. We would never do this, and we were doing it. So who knows? But I'm in a good spot now, and I enjoy what I'm doing.
Chuck, thank you, man.
Yeah, thank you, Rich.
Really appreciate the time. It was fascinating.
Well, thank you for having me. I enjoyed talking to you.
Absolutely.